me to be honest with you guys, like I've never gotten this vulnerable on the podcast before. Like I talk about death almost all day, every single day, and it's so normal to me. But there's something about this that feels like I can't even begin to process. Hello friends, welcome back to another episode of the And Also podcast. I'm your host Madison, and thank you so much for tuning in today. Make sure you subscribe, download, like, rate, comment, blah blah blah, all the things, because it really helps the show. So this is going to be my first solo episode of season 2, which I'm very excited about. I didn't do too many solo episodes in season 1. I didn't feel like I was in a place to share things that I was going through, but now in season 2 I really want to connect more with you guys as the host of the show and just as someone who is trying to create a space for mental health support and grief support online. And I feel like sharing my story will just help us all feel more connected, and you guys can understand more of what I'm going through, and I think it'll just be a really good thing. So this solo episode is all about me turning 25. And I turned 25 on November 30th, so you will see this episode probably a week before I turn 25. And I have a lot of grief surrounding turning 25, and we'll get into that and how it relates to Regis's death and all of that. But before we get into the heavy stuff, let's do our drink of the day. I actually made a drink today and I'm very excited about it and very hyper fixated. So I'm going to put a video up on the screen if you're watching of the recipe for this matcha latte, and I'll also have it in the show notes if you want to recreate it at home. But oh my goodness, this is my hyperfixation drink of the holiday season, at least for now. So first of all, the glass I am drinking this out of is literally the cutest thing in the whole world. It has little black bows on it. I feel like it was made for me. There are 2 very important ingredients that go into this latte, and I feel like you need these or just something adjacent if you want to recreate this and have it be as good as the one I make is. And so many people tell me, like, Madison, how do you make matcha taste good? First of all, I love teas and matcha and the taste of green and the scent of green, if that makes sense. I do think matcha can be a little nasty if it's a lower quality. If it's not like a ceremonial grade, it's just, I don't know, it's not going to be great. Like, a lot of people who don't like matcha tell me they've had either Starbucks or Dunkin' matcha. So I'm like, maybe don't do that. That's your first mistake. I always think making matcha at home is just the best. But if I'm ordering a matcha latte out, I make sure it's ceremonial grade, and then I get a iced oat milk matcha latte with a little bit of vanilla or maple syrup, or even sometimes almond flavor if they have that, and that will be the perfect matcha latte. As for this one, this is a peppermint mocha matcha latte, and I'm obsessed with it. I was skeptical at first. I was like, peppermint and mocha, like mocha, okay, but peppermint and matcha, I don't know. But you guys, trust and believe, this is the best thing ever. So this is the Chamberlain Coffee chocolate matcha. I know they just came out with a peppermint matcha for the holiday season, but they have the chocolate matcha year round. So, you can always get this. So yeah, the chocolate matcha, and then the nut pods, peppermint mocha, almonds, and coconut creamer. These 2 together, please. I also add the Torani peppermint syrup and like a chocolate syrup. And I'm telling you, depending on your sweetness level, you could just do these 2 because they have enough flavor and sweetness on their own, or you can add in that other stuff to really elevate it. This is the way I've been caffeinating for the last 2 weeks since I started making this drink. I do a lot of drink recipes on my personal Instagram, so if you want more drink recipes or more details on some of the drinks I make, you can check those out on my Instagram page, which is always linked below. And then make sure you also follow the podcast Instagram page while you're at it. Hey guys, I just wanted to let you know, next week's episode falls on Thanksgiving weekend, or the weekend after Thanksgiving / the day after my birthday. So next week's episode is going to just be a mental health update. I'm not going to have a full-length episode, but we'll be back with a full-length episode the following week. But definitely tune in for the mental health update because I want to keep you guys in the loop of what's going on. without further ado, let's get into today's episode, why I am scared to turn 25. You guys, I feel like it's a bold statement to say I'm scared to turn 25. It's not about the age. It's not about like getting older. I am one of the people in this world who does not fear getting older. I look forward to aging, to getting older. I'm not afraid to have wrinkles. You know what I mean? Like that sort of stuff doesn't bother me. And I think it's because of, you know, the amount of death I have dealt with in my life and the amount of death I'm surrounded with every day. It is a massive, massive privilege to see another day. Okay. So I want to just start by saying like, I'm not afraid to turn 25 because I'm getting older and wrinkles and all those things. Like if that's your journey, if that's your path, cool. Not mine. Okay. You know, I work in death. Everything I do kind of relates back to death and grief. The work I do on social media is mostly grief, death related. And then I work at a funeral home and I'm in school for mortuary science. So death is a huge thing for me. And I don't fear death. I don't fear aging. I don't fear the societally deemed negative parts of aging. The reason I'm afraid to turn 25, and let's see if I can say this without crying, is because Regis died when he was 24. So for those of you who don't know, you know, the whole reason for this podcast, the reason for a lot of the stuff I do is because my ex-partner, Regis, who I dated for 6 years, I grew up with him. You know, we started dating when I was like 14, okay? We spent most of our lives together, just, you know, dating, but also being best friends. And he died in 2022 of suicide. And it's weird. There's so many weird aspects to this, right? And especially with me still getting older, you know, so he died when he was 24 and I was 22 when he died. So the last 2 birthdays were fairly digestible, but this one has been really difficult because this is the birthday where I officially have lived more life than he got to live. And it feels really unfair and it feels really stupid and it feels like I don't even want to celebrate. But at the same time, turning 25, like that's huge. And I've worn a lot of hats in my life. I've lived a lot of lives, it feels like. And it's really huge for me to make it to 25 and to be where I'm at and to have accomplished the things I have. So it's this weird balance of like feeling so guilty for getting to live life and live a really good life, a really privileged, incredible, like life full of beauty and joy. And also feel like it's unfair for me to get to do any of this. For me to get to be 25, for me to get to live more wonderful, beautiful days, knowing one, that his last few years of life were incredibly traumatizing and awful, and that it ended. Like he ended. It stopped. He stopped. He's not here. And it's just, you know, that piece in itself is still so hard for me to wrap my mind around. Like he's never going to get older. Like it's just like in some ways my brain is like trying to grasp onto the fact that he was even once a real person. It's so weird. Like death is so weird in that regard of like, how do you know somebody, their physical form, their personhood, their sense of humor, their experiences, and then literally in one moment, they just cease to exist in this way. It's bizarre to me and it makes no sense. And I just, you know, that's something I hyperfixate on. I'm really getting off track here. Yeah, turning 25 feels like a huge turning point in my life. Not because it's 25 and I'm, you know, closer to 30 and, you know, whatever. It's just my life with Regis feels very, very far. And he the little matcha, so I stopped crying. I'm going to be honest with you guys. Like, I've never gotten this vulnerable on the podcast before. Like, I talk about death almost all day, every single day, and it's so normal to me. You might hear cat purrs, by the way. My cat is sitting on my lap for those of you listening. She heard me crying and she's like, I must go hug my mother. But there's something about this that feels like I can't even begin to process and to think about what life looks like after I'm older than Regis. It's weird. It's painful. And I don't like to think about it because it feels unfair. I'm so angry that he didn't get more life, that he didn't get more time, and that he dealt with schizophrenia and he struggled and he fought really hard to be here. It just feels unfair. And I know so many of you guys that have dealt with grief and loss like this, you know, like these sorts of feelings are so normal. The people I've talked to have even said, like, I'm scared to get older than the person I lost. I'm scared to live more life than them. I'm scared to feel farther and farther and farther from them. And that's exactly how I feel. And, you know, I just want to tell you guys, like, it is so normal to feel like this. It is so normal when you're experiencing grief. The world shifts so much. Your perspective, the way you digest everything around you is different. And I never would have thought anything about turning 25. I would have just been like, oh, another birthday. You know, before all this happened. And now it's just different. Everything is bittersweet. Everything is so double-edged. It's why the show is called And Also, because it's like there is this great part. Like, I'm 25. That's crazy. I didn't think I would live past 17. You know what I mean? Like, I can't believe I'm gonna be 25 years old. I can't believe I've accomplished the things I've accomplished. I can't believe I have the friends that I have, the boyfriend that I have, the relationship with my family members that I have. And then there's the other side of like, this is so disgusting and unfair and relentlessly painful. And then you're just stuck in the middle. So it feels like, oh my God, what do I even do? Do I lean into the happiness? Do I lean into the sadness? How much do I lean into both? It's so exhausting to feel this confusion about literally everything. I mean, I think of just everything I've been through since Regis died, since November of 2022. And it's like, wow, I've gotten to do so much. And he has been sitting in a jar on my bookshelf. And here I am. You know what I mean? It's like, I just feel so much guilt. And, you know, so many people will say, like, don't feel guilty. Like, you're celebrating him, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter, because I'm still going to feel guilty. No matter what the logical response is, that's grief for you. You know what I mean? Like, it just forces you to feel whatever it wants you to feel. And you're just kind of like, okay, we're doing this. Like, I feel guilty. And this is the part where I struggle, right? It's like, okay, now what do I do? Like, I know I feel all these things. I know, you know, do I celebrate my birthday? Do I sit alone and just be sad? Like, what do I do? And, you know, my boyfriend is planning me a birthday party and all my friends are going to be here. And it's going to be such a good time. And I know the entire party, I'm just going to be in my head like, this is unfair. This is unfair. And it's not that I am ungrateful, you know, for the party and the experience and whatever, and my friends coming together. I'm so beyond grateful. You have no idea. It's just like the one person who would want to be here more than anybody isn't here. And that's hard. It's actually beyond hard. It's like sickening. It's like you can feel it physically in your stomach, in your chest. So to get back on track with turning 25, there's so much good. And I want to sit here and acknowledge both ends of this, because I think when it comes to grief feelings, there's always going to be more than one side, at least two, but could be multiple, right? Like, there are so many feelings and emotions and ways in which the grief is sitting within us. For me, you know, the sad parts are, it sucks, this is frustrating, I'm angry that Regis isn't here. I feel like it's unfair to celebrate. I feel like it's unfair to receive gifts, to receive love, to receive kindness when he didn't get that. On the other side of that, I am a living extension of him. I am very, very, very aware of that. You know, we were so close, and I hold so much of his life inside of me, and I have to be here to share that. I am so grateful to be someone that gets to do that, right? I deserve to celebrate myself. I deserve to be proud of my accomplishments. I deserve to be loved. I deserve the happiness, the kindness. That doesn't take away from the sad feelings. That doesn't negate them or, you know, make them unimportant. there are both sides that are both true. And there has to be a balance of like, there are times where I just want to lean into the sad feelings and be like, damn, this sucks. I'm going to sit in the fact that this sucks and just feel it and feel miserable and be a hater, right? And then there's the other side where I just actually lean into the good and think about all the things I have done that are great and all of the work I'm doing to honor him and to continue to show him that I love him and care for him and that I'm never going to forget him no matter how far he feels from me. So that's another point I really wanted to talk about, is feeling really far and disconnected from the person you lost. Every year that passes, I feel more and more distant from my time with Regis and his time just alive. It feels almost like something that is more of a story versus moments I actually lived. And the more that time passes, the more I just feel that way. I feel like, did that even really happen? Or did it happen this way? Or, you forget things. You start to forget the sound of somebody's voice. You start to forget, the way that their eyes looked. You start to forget the way that they physically felt. All of these things. You want to talk? You could probably hear her purring like no one's business. And I think that has been one of the harder parts for me, like the whole idea of feeling farther, feeling disconnected, kind of almost feeling like it's a lifetime ago. And I think the struggle there for me has just been like, I lived my most foundational developmental years of my life doing every single thing with this person, right? So now when I look back on the entirety of my life, every single memory that I have that was once beautiful and good is now bittersweet. It's looking through everything I've lived through the grief lens. That in itself is a grief. Just feeling like my whole life is almost just now a tale. Just these very distant memories that I'm carrying the weight of two people now. I'm carrying it for both of us. And, his perspective of the experience is not present anymore. So I'm all that's left to carry all the life memories. You know what I mean? And that is so intense. And so it's a huge responsibility. And then you look back on your life and you're like, oh my God, like every memory I have, prom, getting my license, like getting my first car, graduating high school, starting college, all these major life milestones that I've experienced, like he was right there. Everything in my life is just different now. All of these wonderful memories, though they're still wonderful, they have a different look to them in my mind, because every time I think of anything, it's like, oh, Regis is dead. Oh, I went to prom with Regis and he's dead. It's like this add-on to the sentence, to the memory now. Ultimately, like the whole idea here that I'm struggling with is I'm turning 25. I feel guilty because I am older than him. I am not supposed to be older than him. He is supposed to be older than me. He is supposed to be here. He is supposed to be living a beautiful, wonderful life. So there's that. Then there's the guilt for being the person who got to survive, for being the person who, won the game of which one of us is going to die first and how are we going to deal with it. I won. I'm the winner. We talked about this. We talked about this so many times. We talked about what would you do if the other person died? And then there's, the idea that looking back on my life, it's all very, very different now. It's very disillusioned from the good memories, right? It's like, it's all a mix. And it's just hard to become older when you feel somebody pulling you back into the past. In the way that I did, the best way I could describe this feeling is like, let's say you're walking along the beach with the person, right? Like Regis and I are walking on the beach, and then all of a sudden he just stops walking. Like he just stands there and then he's refusing to move, and he's just stood on the beach, and I just have to keep walking now alone. So now I'm walking alone, and the farther I walk down the beach, when I look back, he becomes farther and farther and farther. And it feels like there's going to come a time where I just can't see him anymore. And that is how I've been feeling about this birthday. It's like, oh my God, like I'm going to now experience phases of life that he didn't get to. I'm going to now live in a stage of life that he will never get to live in. It makes me feel sick. It makes me feel so sick to my stomach. Like it's bizarre how uncomfortable that feeling is. And just knowing that like every single year that passes, I'm going to look back and everything about Regis is going to feel so distant. There's no new memories. There's no new conversations. There's no phone calls. There's no chance of anything ever getting better with him and what he was going through. It just feels like I think this birthday is just like really reopening the grief wound for me, like the really deep parts of it. You know, he died 2 years ago now. And I remember my first birthday after he passed, it was really hard because it was like I had the thought about my 25th birthday back then. I was like, there is going to come a day where I'm older than him. And I have feared this birthday ever since he died. It was one of the first things I feel like I thought of when it came to his death was like, there's going to come a day where I'm older than him. And I already know how difficult and that's gonna feel. So beyond all of this, I've just been anticipating this for so long. It's crazy that it's actually here and that I'm actually going to live through this whole rest of my life being older than him. To wrap up on a bit of a high note and to leave you with some actionable ideas of how you can work through this if it's something you're going through. You know, I still have my Regis journal where I write to him, and I also actively think about this. Like when it comes up, I dedicate time to it. I'm not going to run from these feelings. I'm not going to pretend like this is okay because it doesn't feel okay. I'm just dealing with it as it comes, and I'm allowing space to feel it, to acknowledge the good and the bad. And when the really bad feelings come up, I try to bring a good feeling to that as well. Like, for example, if I'm feeling really guilty about getting to live longer than him, I'll be like, I feel really guilty that I get to live longer. And also I get to take those feelings and use them for something good. I get to share his story. I get to continue talking about him, keeping his name alive when it feels like a lot of other people aren't. So you have to try to find the flip side, acknowledge both, sit with both, feel both, grieve. It's okay to feel it. I think too, just finding someone who gets it that you can talk to about this, whether it's an online space like Instagram or listening to a podcast, watching a YouTube video, like listen to other people's stories. Don't ever feel like you're the only one who has felt this way, because grief will trick you into thinking that. Grief will trick you into thinking you're the only person who's ever felt this. I promise you, almost every grieving person has had the same set of emotions that you also have. So I never want you to feel like you're the only one going through this. I promise you, there are 1,000,001 resources. We are so lucky to live in a time where grief is something we're talking about more than ever. Find someone in your life, find a trusted peer, find resources that work for you. It's okay to feel this way. And the reason I wanted to make this episode was to let you know these feelings are hard. It's really vulnerable to sit here and share these things, but it is so important to acknowledge that feeling these ways in your grief experience is so normal. That's what I have to say about turning 25. I know it's a little bit heavy. I know this is a very difficult thing that so many people go through, and I feel like it's important to talk about these things. It feels embarrassing and weird and vulnerable, but it's so valuable to have these sorts of conversations. So thank you guys for, listening to me talk and listening to what I've been going through and what I've been dealing with in the last few weeks leading up to my birthday. Okay, guys, so before we wrap up today's episode, I want to give you my mental health update with SHEA. So if you don't know, I did an episode in season 2 with SHEA Opella. She is an inner alignment coach, and I have been working with her for the past few weeks. We're on week 3 right now, and I wanted to share my updates on the work that we're doing together. So I have been in the trenches, just going through this experience with her. So this week was a really big one for me because I talked a lot about Regis, and I shared a lot of the traumatic experiences that happen in relation to his mental illness and his death. And there's a lot there, and there's a lot that's very personal that I do not want to necessarily share. But I will tell you guys, something that we worked on doing this week is for me to basically create a timeline of every event that happened with Regis that like pinpoints, a moment for me, and writing out the timeline, and then kind of mentally bringing myself back to that point and writing out how I felt in that moment, and then writing out how I feel now. A really big realization that SHEA helped me realize this week is, it was coming up on his death anniversary, and I was feeling very numb around the anniversary of his death. I felt like I didn't even know how I felt. I felt confused. I felt just like, it's another day. And she was like, well, the reason you're probably feeling like that is because the death part is not the part that I have been struggling with for the past year and a half. I have accepted his actual death in the way that things went down with his actual death, right? But what I have not dealt with is all of the traumatic experiences leading up to the death and then after the death. And so I feel very numb because there's all of these things that I experience that are just sitting within me, and I don't even know what to do with them because they're so heavy. So a lot of times in therapy or in grief work, it almost feels like you're dealing more with the actual death and the feelings after death than you are with all the lead up to the death. And for me, because his death was a suicide, there was a lot of stuff leading up to it that I just never dealt with, never thought of dealing with. I almost felt like, well, it's over, what am I going to do? But there's a lot of pinpointed experiences leading up to his death that have been the points where I struggled to realize that I needed to address them, if that makes sense. So writing out that timeline really helped me pinpoint moments that felt more traumatic or more intense or more difficult to deal with, and then working through each of those points versus just trying to look at Regis's death as like this whole thing and just address it as one thing, the death. For me, I have to go through each moment and work through each moment because each moment feels like a grief and feels like an experience in itself. And I think a lot of people might relate to this. The idea of, losing someone to an illness, whether it's cancer or some sort of terminal illness or mental illness, like you see the person just slowly disappear, slowly become less present in themselves. And that is really disturbing. That in itself is a grief, aside from the actual death. Yeah, so we worked through that timeline this week. We worked through setting up me building it out, and then throughout the week I worked on it. And then in week 4, we are going to address the timeline and go through some of those key moments that were super difficult and then do some deeper trauma work. So it's an intense thing. And reliving all of those moments for me was really difficult. A lot of stuff came up that I had forgotten, a lot of really intense and heavy stuff, a lot of moments that were scary and left me really confused, left me really hopeless. Those came up for me, and that was hard. And really just writing out that timeline in itself felt like a healing journey of its own. But I encourage you, if you have dealt with loss, especially a loss that might have been traumatic, to not just try to deal with and heal through the actual death experience, but to work through all of the moments leading up that also incorporated a lot of that trauma into your grief experience. That for me was huge. So I'm super grateful that SHEA helped me realize that a lot of the pain I'm feeling inside is not actually about the death. It's about all the other trauma involved. So if you're going through something similar, this might be a really helpful exercise for you. If you were interested in working with SHEA, of course, all of her information is in the show notes. You could check that out, send her a message, chat with her, whatever you would like to do. She has really, truly changed my life. It's only been 3 weeks, but let me tell you, the things I have discovered about myself, girl, it would have taken me a lifetime to do that on my own. So huge shout out to SHEA from Rooted Within. I'm going to check in with you guys next week for week 4, which means we'll be halfway done with the 8-week program. I can't even believe it. All right, you guys, thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the And Also podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to click the subscribe button. How cool would it be if we could get to like 500 subscribers? Like, come on, that would be so cool. Oh, so please subscribe, give this video a like, leave a comment, let me know what you thought. If you're listening on audio platforms, be sure to give the show a 5-star rating or rate it whatever you think it deserves. Leave a review, download it, send it to a friend, blah, blah, blah. You know the drill. And of course, be sure to follow us on Instagram at @andalsopod. If you want to connect with me personally, my personal Instagram is always linked in the description. But yeah, check out the Instagram page for the show. I would love to reach 1,000 followers, and we're only 50 away as I'm recording this. So definitely give me a follow. All right, you guys, thank you so much for listening. If you're struggling right now, just know there's going to be a point where you can digest it. You can heal. You can feel safe again. I promise it's possible. It really is. As much as it's hard to believe sometimes, I promise you, you will find moments of peace. Sending you love, sending you all the hugs in the whole world. And I will talk to you next week. Bye, guys.